Hello, this is my first video in English in a year, except for those I am saying. Not COVID, just a slight case of sore throat. Anyway, this video is about Led Zeppelin and their relationship with the occult. It's probably going to be the first of a series of videos. Because we all know that Led Zeppelin had actual ties to the occult. It's not like Black Sabbath or other bands that uh, they made jokes about Satan and stuff. I mean, Led Zeppelin was real. They followed Aleister Crowley or Crowley. I don't know how to say the name of the guy. I used to think it was Crowley because of the Ozzy Osbourne song. And Aleister Crowley was an occultist that lived in the first half of the 20th century, as you know. And he was British, and he would say things like, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." And I don't know what it means very well, but many people take it very seriously, like Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin. And according to the Vintage News site, Crowley was a very controversial figure in his time. And he went on being controversial even after his death. And in 1898 he became involved in occultism and joined the Golden Dawn, which is a hermetic order, by the way. And they say here it's an organization with Rosicrucian roots. And then he left Golden Dawn and went to found his own esoteric order. And he went to Egypt in 1904, where he had some mystical experiences. He saw a being with a big head and giant eyes that looked like an alien. You know, those aliens in movies, like those little gray men with big heads. That was what he saw. And he wrote then the Book of the Law. I have that. I read that as well. It doesn't mean I understood it. I did it. Not so much into the occult. Like a couple of years ago, I read because I was curious. And Crowley claimed that a spirit had dictated it to him. And one of the basic precepts of the book was, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." And this is the basis of Thelema, which Jimmy Page followed. I think he still follows. And Crowley was known for the use of drugs and for sexual liberation, way ahead of his time. He really influenced the 60s. And he had this thing he called magic, which ends with a K, not with a C. And according to the Vintage News, opinions on the sort of person he was are widely variable depending on where you look. And he was also a mountaineer. He really climbed mountains as well. And sorry for the way I'm speaking because my throat is really aching a bit. And Crowley died in 1947, and I believe Jimmy Page was born in 1944. And many of his views and philosophies helped shape the views of the 60s. They've influenced the Beatles as well, and they've influenced a lot of people, like Ozzy Osbourne. "Mr. Crowley, do you talk to the dead?" Yeah. And Dave Bowie, there is a song, I think it's the Booley Brothers, and Dave Bowie sings about that. But I don't think he was so much into Crowley. He was into everything for like a few seconds, and then he would move into other things. Later he was into the Kabbalah, and previously he had been into Buddhism, and he was always searching into stuff. David Bowie, I mean. Uh, but according to the Vintage News, as the Beatles era morphed into the psychedelic movement of the late 60s, and a variety of recreational drugs came into more common use, musicians began looking for something farther removed from the mainstream. Yeah. And it was around that time that Jimmy Page started to become interested in Crowley and his writings. And their first album was released in 1969. And according to Correct the Banks, was about the time that Page asked his bandmates to join him in a magic, ending with a K, ending with a K ritual based on Crowley's writings to help the band. All of them took part of it except for John Paul Jones. And as I've heard you Led Zeppelin fans tell me that did John Paul Jones take drugs like the others? Because everything I see about the others, Page, Bonham, Plant, everybody was very much into drugs. But I didn't see John Paul Jones taking part of these things. And then you have the Led Zeppelin 3 album. I have it. And you know this, you have the vinyl, the LP, and there are the grooves, and on one side, have you ever seen a vinyl album? Oh, Jesus Christ. Let me see. Did I say vinyl well? Let me say that. Have you ever seen that? A long play? A vinyl? Stuff? Let me see if I find here to show it to you. And have you ever seen that? Yeah, you got the grooves, and there was this record player. You will place the record on the record player, and then they had a needle, and the needle will really detect the music into the grooves, and then it will send the signal to the amplifier to the boom boxes or whatever, the amplifiers. And in the place where there are no grooves, you actually read, do a wield, so mode would it be. Very interesting, isn't that? And on the Led Zeppelin album, Led Zeppelin 4, which it doesn't have the name of the band on it, but people call it Led Zeppelin 4. It has an elderly man carrying some sticks. And if you have the album or the CD, you open it up. Not the cassette. The cassette, I have it. It doesn't have anything. But if you have the CD or the album, you open it up and you see the hermit on it, the tarot card of the hermit. And if you place the hermit against a mirror, then you see a black dog. People say it's a black dog, which is a song, Black Dog, by Led Zeppelin. The album shows the image of the hermit from the tarot, and the inner sleeve bears 4 esoteric symbols meant to represent the band members. In case you didn't know, Jimmy Page also used to have a bookstore. I think it was in London, where he sold books on the occult. And he bought up Aleister Crowley house near the Lake Loch Ness, yeah, where the monster lives. I visited there back in 2015. I didn't see any monster, but I bought a plush animal of the monster. Yeah, lovely, lovely, lovely. And Yeah, the name of the house, the property was Boleskine or Boleskine. Yes, and it has recently caught fire. They're trying to rebuild it. No, it doesn't belong to Jimmy Page anymore. But Jimmy Page in 1972 agreed to record the soundtrack for a movie called Lucifer Rising by a guy called Kenneth Anger. And Kenneth Anger, I think, is like 90. He wrote Hollywood Babylon. I think that's the name of the book he wrote. And he had ties with at least one guy of the Manson family. And something happened, and they had an argument that ended up in a falling out in 1975. And Anger trashed Page in the media, and he said in private that he had laid a curse on Page and Led Zeppelin. Oh, yes. Then I'm afraid. Page and Led Zeppelin. Now I'm afraid. And indeed, J. Page much later, recorded the soundtrack. I mean, he's released the soundtrack he had recorded. And Kenneth Anger ended up asking a guy called Bobby Bouzole to make the soundtrack. And Bobby Bouzole had been in jail for murdering a person. He was part of the Manson family. And he did a good job. You can find it online. It's very good. He's still in jail. He's been for like 50 years. He's much older than I am. And he's got a YouTube channel here. You can check it out. Yeah, he has. Anyway. And after that, things got weird with Led Zeppelin. And they say here the Plant and his family were nearly killed when their car went off a cliff in Greece. And the accident forced the band to cancel the rest of their physical graffiti tour and delay the recording of their following album. And then Plant got laryngitis, and the band's equipment got laryngitis after the band's equipment had been shipped to the US. But I don't think it's the case of a curse. I don't think it's because of a curse. You have to see that in the 70s, the sound equipment was very bad. So frequently you were singing or playing and you didn't know what you were doing. Nowadays, everybody, there is equipment, good equipment, then you can actually hear very well what you're singing. Back then, you didn't have that. So frequently you had to really force yourself to sing louder. So it's not, I don't think it's because of a curse. But then in 1977, Plant's son became ill and died. Page and Jones didn't attend the funeral, prompting Plant to consider leaving the band. And finally, in 1980, Bonham died, and then they disbanded. Curse or coincidence? You go figure. I'm not so much of a materialistic person. I believe in a lot of spiritual things. So I think it might have happened. Yes, might be the consequence of a curse. Anyway, Plant is still singing and performing. And Page still has ties with the occult, and he's never denied that. And this is the first video of many about Led Zeppelin. There is another video in Portuguese here with the same content. And I'm doing this because I like Led Zeppelin. If you want to subscribe, you do it. I'd appreciate that. Okay. And I think this whole involvement of Led Zeppelin with the occult, it adds up to the imagery of the band and to the myth of Led Zeppelin. what the band became even after they disbanded. Because you see kids listening to Led Zeppelin, and you see people who are like in their 20s and teens listening to Led Zeppelin. Their music is here to stay forever. So it's part of history, and it's part of their history. And somehow it makes the band way more interesting. And of course, there's the music, and there are many other things I'm about to talk about Led Zeppelin, like charges of plagiarism, teenage groupies, lots of other stuff. And this is just the first video. Sorry for anything. Sorry if I made a mistake in some English pronunciation, because I'm more used to hearing and reading in English than speaking. And see you later, guys. Cheers.